Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. Today you are having your session number 4 of week 2 via Nurture International School online support system. Our today's lesson is A Polar Explorer. This is basically the biography of Roald Amundsen, who was an explorer, and it is about his exploration towards North and South Poles. Before moving any further, let's talk about polar regions. The north and south poles comprises of the earth's polar regions. Okay, the north and south poles are called polar regions. You might say that these poles are at the ends of the earth. Let's read about north and south poles. The north pole is at the northern end of this axis, while the south pole is at the southern end. The area around the north pole is called the Arctic, which is surrounded by continents, while the area around the south pole is called the Antarctic, which is surrounded by oceans. North pole is less colder than south pole, while south pole is far colder than the north pole. So back in centuries, it was quite hard for people to explore these regions because of their harsh weather conditions. But Amundsen, he was successful in exploring these regions. So this story is all about Amundsen's exploration to these polar regions. Here is a brief introduction of Roald Amundsen. By occupation, he was an explorer. He was born on July 16, 1872 in Borge, which is a city in Norway, and he was died on June 18, 1928 during a rescue attempt. He was best known for first man to visit the South Pole. Out of these two poles, he was the first one who explored South Pole. Here is the biography of Roald Amundsen exploration. The story that is given in your book about his explorations is based on his biography. I have added some additional information in it so that when you read the story you will be more clear about it. Okay, let's read it. Roald Amundsen, 1872 to 1928, was an explorer of the North and South Poles. He led the first expedition to reach the South Pole and was the first person to visit both the North and South Poles. Okay, he led his expedition to reach South Pole first, and then he visited the other pole, that is North Pole as well. Where did Roald Amundsen born? Roald was born in Borge, Norway on July 16, 1872. He grew up in Norway with his three brothers. His father, who was involved with the shipping industry, died when Roald was just 14 years old. Roald had dreamt of becoming an explorer, but his mother wanted him to become a doctor. He followed his mother's wishes until she died when he was 21 years old. Then he left school to pursue his dream of exploring. Roald became crew member on various ships traveling to the Arctic. In 1887, he was first mate on a ship named the Belgica. So Belgica was the name of the ship. It became the first expedition to survive the winter on the Arctic. So you see, um, at the Arctic region, the winter was so harsh and it was really hard to survive over there. But he learned, and it was his first expedition where he could survive in that harsh weather. Roald learned valuable lessons of survival during these early trips that would help him later on. So during that expedition, he also learned some valuable lessons. One was that fresh seal meat had vitamin C, which would help in curing scurvy. Scurvy is a disease of bleeding gums, or like swollen gums, okay, and that is caused by vitamin C. So he learned that in order to to overcome this deficiency, they had to eat seal meat. Another was to use animal skins rather than wool coats to keep warm. So they had to keep themselves warm. So the other lesson that he had learned, to use animal skins, okay, other than wool coats, they could use animal skins to keep themselves warm. Northwest Passage. So this was the passage that he first discovered to reach the North Pole. In 1903, Roald commanded his own expedition on his ship, the Jaw. This was the name of the ship. Here it is. This was Jaw ship. He traveled to the magnetic North Pole and was the first to discover the Northwest Passage from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. This pass had been searched for over many centuries, but Roald's ability to navigate and survive this trip. So no one before Amundsen could find this passage, but it was first discovered by Roald Amundsen. South Pole. Roald next planned an expedition to reach the North Pole. However, when he heard that Robert Peary claimed to have already reached the North Pole, he made last-minute plans and decided to pursue the South Pole. So it is a controversy because in the story we are also told that the first one who explored the North Pole was also Roald Amundsen. But somewhere in the biography, we find that the other person that named Robert Peary, he claimed that he was already there, or he reached the North Pole first. So what happened? He kept this secret until the last minute. So once he heard that Robert Peary had already reached there, so he decided to reach the South Pole first. Okay, so he kept this as a secret. He was in a race with British explorer Robert Scott to be the first to the South Pole. On January 14, 1911, Amundsen's ship, the Fram, okay, this was another ship whose name was Fram, arrived at the Bay of Whales in Antarctica. They set up camp there and prepared for the trip to the South Pole. Roald made sure that the dogs were well fed. On the one of the crew, a carpenter named Olaf Jarland, redesigned the sleds they would use. He lowered the weight from 195 pounds to 50 pounds. This lower weight would be crucial in saving energy during the trip. So this is what they did to save some energy to reach the South Pole first. So you see, this was a sledge that they made to reach the South Pole. This is the sledge. Sledge is a wooden kind of thing that is used for traveling on the snow. So they made this sledge to reach the South Pole. They set out to reach the South Pole 10 months after arriving on Antarctica on October 20th. There were 5 men, 25 dogs, 52 dogs, and 4 sleds. At first they traveled quickly, but soon they had to pass over mountains and avoid dangerous crevasses. Finally, after nearly 2 months of hard traveling, they reached their destination on December 14, 1911. Roald Amundsen planted the Norwegian flag at the South Pole. So he was the first one who planted the flag at South Pole. All 5 of Amundsen's crew returned safely to base camp, but only 11 dogs. There were 52 dogs, out of which 11 dogs could have only they could survive, made it back alive. The expedition took 99 days and traveled over 1800 miles. So you see, this was the South Pole where they planted the Norwegian flag. Robert Scott's British expedition reached the South Pole 35 days after Amundsen. So he was in race with this person's Robert Scott, so he could manage to reach South Pole before this British explorer. Unfortunately, they did not make it back alive, but were found frozen to death months later. Uh, 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 this person, Robert Scott, they could not make it alive. Sorry, make it to come back alive. Okay. So here is about North Pole. Let's see how did they reach there. Amundsen still had the goal of reaching the North Pole. In 1926, he joined an expedition with Umberto Nobile aboard the airship Norge. They flew over the North Pole in May in what was is considered to be the first undisputed. Why undisputed? Because many people dispute over Robert Pearce's claim that he reached the North Pole first. So this was quite, you know, uh, disputed matter. So, visit to the North Pole. Rescue attempt. Roald died in a plane crash during a rescue attempt on June 18, 1928. He was trying to save some of the crew of the one of Nobel's airships that had crashed. So he was died in rescuing them. So this story is all about the biography of Amundsen exploration. So you need to read the story that is given in your book, and I hope you will enjoy it. Thank you very much.